Your one piece of
Yeah,
advice?
I would say get comfortable as fast as possible. And I mean that specifically, don't wait until you are ready to have a kind of real conversation with the native speaker. There is no ready, you will never feel ready. The discomfort is the learning. So find a native speaker and find a language exchange partner. Go somewhere you can talk to yourself as well in the mirror. That every single time, comfort is the enemy of acquisition. I used to sit down to study and I feel incompetent for at least 10 minutes. The students are actually terrified, not bored, not disengaged. They are literally terrified. And that fear, I would say, is the number one enemy of an English language teacher. Not vocabulary gaps, not grammar, but I would say that's a fear.
Language room. I'm Andrea, and today I have someone sitting across me, virtually across from me, who generally made me rethink the way I talk about language learning. His name is Mohamed Zeeshan. Welcome. He's an English educator. He speaks Mandarin at a pretty impressive level. And he has this whole philosophy about teaching that honestly threw me a little the first time I heard it. Jazam, welcome.
Yes, thanks for inviting me up on the stage. And it's really, really a cordial welcome that you have put a lot of time from your daily schedule and you have given me a lot of huge respect for that. So thanks, Andrea. And I love that you said it through you a little. And that's basically my goal with everything I do here.
Is it? Let's start with that because I think it's a good entry point. You have this phrase you use, confidence over perfection. And when I first heard it, I thought, okay, that's a nice slogan. But then you explained what you actually meant by it. And it was so much before, much more specific than I expected.
You're right. Yeah. It's not like a poster you'd buy at a gift shop. And I know, but sometimes it comes from something really concrete. And the thing is that in so many classrooms that I've seen this across different countries and different age groups, the students are actually terrified, not bored, not disengaged. They are literally terrified of kind of making mistakes in front of their classmates. And that fear, I would say, is the number one enemy of an English language teacher, of any language teacher. Not vocabulary gaps, not grammar, but I would say that's a fear.
And it makes sense when you think about it, because making mistakes in public feels so personal right now. Like, it's not just I said the wrong word. It's everyone now thinks I'm stupid.
Exactly, yeah, and the social cost, of that moment it varies so much depending on where you are. So I've thought students from South Asian backgrounds, like the students from the East Asian classrooms, and in a lot of those contexts, the concept of the face, which is in Chinese, it is mianzi, like losing the face in front of your peers. It's very enormous, right? It's very much enormous, and it's not a small things, I would say. So if you cold call a student who isn't ready and they stumble, so you haven't just had a teaching moment, and a teacher who have, like, for example, I have potentially shut them down for the rest of the term. So that's what it really matters, and that particular moment.
Wow. Okay, so how do you work around that? Because you still need them to speak.
Yes, I try to build what I think of as, I would say, psychologically safety net first. And before I even introduce content in a new classroom, I try to spend time co-creating what I call a classroom contract with the students. And it's a very funny thing to do so as well. Like, I do not hand them a list of rules. I try to build I try to build the environment together, right? And I ask them, what do you need to do for that particular instant or for that particular kind of environment. So I try to feel them safe, so that they can try enough, and then and they tell me that when the guidelines are theirs, so they actually follow them, and it's night and day, so they follow that thing as well.
Okay, that's interesting. The ownership piece. You're essentially making them the architects of their own learning space, isn't it?
Exactly. And the second thing is you have to design your tasks in a way that gives students a kind of a predictable win before you ask them to take a risk. So, if I have a really resistant student, suppose, in my classrooms, like, the kid in the big arms crossed and not, making eye contact. So I won't put them on the spot. I won't put them on the spot in the classrooms. I'll walk over quietly during my group task, and I would get down to that student, that particular students, to their eye level, and I try to negotiate a micro goal with my students. And I'll say, hey, in about 5 minutes, I'm gonna ask your group one vocabulary word. So can you be the one who read it out loud for me? So one word, just basically one word, and that's it. Like they almost always say yes, and because it's very manageable, Andrea, it's very manageable and it's very safe for that purpose.
And then what happens after that?
Yeah, usually that starts showing up differently because they had a win, and that wins basically compounds with the passage of time. You know that.
Okay. I want to dig into your actually teaching methods because you mentioned something earlier before we started recording about the 30-70 rule. What's that?
Oh yeah, this is something I'm almost obsessive about. So in any given lesson, I try to keep my own talking as an English teacher to about 30% of the total lesson time, which means the students are doing 70% of the work. And that sounds obvious when you say it out loud, right? So of course the students should be talking more, that, Andrea. So but to go into almost any classrooms and watch what actually happens. The teacher talks and talks and talks, and then ask that any questions, and no one puts their hand up, and we basically move on as teachers.
No, I mean, I was definitely that student, nodding along, understanding really nothing.
Right, yeah, and you're not alone, by the way. You're not alone. The thing is that listening is passive, and passive processing doesn't just build the language. So what I personally think is that production does. Production helps you in that term. So you have to actually attempt to form the sentences, and you have to struggle with them. You have to make the error, and you have to course correct yourself. And that whole messy process is where the students and the growth happens.
Okay, so how do you actually enforce that 30%? Like,
Yeah,
do you time yourself?
that's very interesting. Yes, I used to actually, when I was first starting out, I would literally set a mental timer and I would catch myself. Now it's more intuitive, but I structure lessons around frameworks that force it. Like one of the most important method I use a lot is the triple P, right? Triple P: presentation, practice, and production. Presentation, practice, and productions. So I present a concept really briefly, and then we go into the control practice with the peers, and then they do something free and creative with the language actually. So this whole architecture, this whole framework that I have built of the lesson, built around them, is basically not me explaining the things, but they actually explains the things.
Yes. What about grammar? Because I feel like that's always the elephant in the room. Like, you have to teach it, but too much of it is just deadening.
Oh, grammar. It's very difficult. Yeah. So my approach to grammar is what people simply call the guided discovery. And it's basically the opposite of standing at the board and lecturing about the tenses instead of saying, okay, today we are learning the present perfect tense. So here are the rules. I give the students kind of a set of example sentences, the real contextual sentences, and I have them work and pace, and I figure out the patterns themselves. So, kind of, what do these sentences have in common? I ask these questions from the students, and I ask them that when would you use this? So, what does this mean when you switch it to the past simple tense? So, I would say they are basically like detectives, essentially.
Great, that's great. And they actually get it. They figure it out.
Yes, most of the time, yeah, not always perfectly, but they get close enough. When you then give them the formal level for the thing that they just discovered, so it usually sticks in their muscle memory, because it's not new information. It's a name for something they have already found. So that's a very totally different cognitive experience there from being told a rule, I would say, that you have never encountered before.
Yeah, that's kind of beautiful, actually.
Well, it also makes my life easier, which is a plus point for me.
Okay, let's talk about something I find genuinely hard to navigate, and I'm curious about your take. Error correction. When do you correct? When do you not? Because I feel like getting this wrong is easily easy.
Okay, so yeah, I personally, it is, and I think the answer it completely depends on what the student is trying to do in that particular moment in the classrooms that I'm designing a lesson plan. So if we are doing a kind of suppose a fluency task like a debate or role play or a storytelling kind of activity, so and I jump in to correct someone's verb tense or sentence, so what have I done? What have I done at that time? I've stopped them. I've made them self conscious. I've raised what we call the affective filter, which is basically the anxiety level. And now they are not thinking about what they want to say, they are thinking about not making mistakes. And this is the biggest hurdle and mistakes for the learners. So, which is the opposite of what you want in a fluency tasks as a teacher. Yeah.
Right. You've basically taught them to be careful instead of fluent. That's right?
Exactly, yeah. So during my fluency activities, I don't interrupt. I sit back, I listen, I take notes anonymously, and no names, kind of attached to that. And then at the end of the session, I'll put some of those structures on the board, and that here are some interesting things I heard today in your classrooms. So how could we say this differently? And then and I workshop them together at a classroom. So no one knows whose mistakes it was, and it becomes a very collaborative polish rather than simply, I would say, a correction in the classroom. So yeah,
That's
everybody
so
feels safe.
clever. Yeah, that's so clever. It removes the shame, doesn't it?
Yes, totally. But this is the flip side. If we are doing an accuracy focused task like drilling a specific structures, so then yes, I correct immediately, because in that context, the whole point is, Andrea, it's getting right. So the students know that's the goal, and so an immediate correction isn't just a surprise, or I would say an embarrassment. It's basically the part of the process. It's part of the activity, I would say.
That's about signaling to them which mood they're in. Is that correct?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And being really transparent about it, I actually said out loud at the start of an activity. And this one's about fluency. I don't care about small grammar slips. So just, I keep talking, or this one's about accuracy. I will jump into there. Here's something. So setting that expectation means for me the correction that doesn't feel like an attack on my students. So it's part of the game they agreed to play on with me.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I want to shift gears because I think there's a whole other dimension to your work that we haven't touched on yet. You're learning Mandarin, and not in a casual way. You're at HSK 4. Tell me about it. Why Mandarin?
So a few years ago, I started getting really interested in the international school ecosystems and East Asia, and I just started studying the language. And what happened was completely unexpected. You wouldn't believe this thing, Andrea. Like studying Mandarin transformed me how I teach the English language to my students. So yeah,
Wait, wait. Say more about that.
there's a very interesting approach that I use in my classrooms. Uh, it's basically an analogy that I say, if an excellent doctor cannot kind of treat or cure 100 disease, so he's not an excellent doctor. He's not considered an excellent doctor. Similarly, in language learning, if you don't make mistakes, you simply don't learn. So, bu sheng bai bing,
Okay.
bu sheng lang yi. 在yu shui xi zhong, 不分错误教学不会.
Okay.
I hope I've corrected it, I pronounced it correctly.
Confusing.
Uh, So Mandarin is basically really fascinating linguistically because it has no verb conjugation, none. Like there is no I go, you go, and he goes situation basically. So it is making the Mandarin a very kind of a really interesting language to learn. So time is basically expressed through context and time words. You just say the time marker and the verb stays the same. So when I'm teaching English language to the native Mandarin speakers and they say yesterday he go to a school, suppose, so I used to think, okay, that's a grammar error, but now I understand that is not laziness or the carelessness. So their brain is applying a perfectly logical system, and I truly understand that because I've studied that quite well. So I don't see that that's just the wrong one. So it's called L1 interference, the language one interference. Their first syntax is kind of, I would say, bleeding into their second language output.
Okay, so you can actually diagnose where the error is coming from.
Yeah, Andrea, I can trace it back to the source, and that changes everything about how I respond. So instead of just saying wrong, it should be went. I can say in Mandarin, like time words do the job of the tense. In English, the verb tense, the verb itself, I would say, it carries that information. So let's put it side by side, and that comparative movement, that's when you see the light is bulbing, it's turning on in the students' minds and the brains. So because now it's not just correcting an error, it's basically teaching them the linguistics, and their own languages become the tools for the understanding.
No, that is actually a really different way of thinking about it. You're not just speaking English, you're helping them understand how English works as a system. I'm right?
That's exactly it. Yes, and Mandarin also has no articles, no definite or indefinite articles like a, in, or the. So those concepts there just doesn't exist in the language. So when Mandarin speakers write English and drop articles all over the place again and again, it's not random, right? It's completely systematic, and knowing that, basically keeping that in mind, it means that I can design the specific activities targeting that gap rather than just hoping they will just pick it up themselves, and they can design the specific activities targeting those gaps. So through the exposure, I would say, so I try to identify those gaps.
Okay. Has learning Mandarin been humbling for you?
Incredibly, the tones, four tones plus a neutral tone, and the meaning of a syllable changes completely depending on which tone you use. So I have embarrassed myself so many times. There's a famous one, ma, with the first tone means mother, and the ma with the third tone means the horse. So then afterwards I will leave it to your imagination that how that conversation went, and it goes on.
No.
You can imagine that.
No, no, no.
It was fine in the end. Everyone
Yeah.
laughed. But that moment of acute embarrassment, that's exactly what my students feel when they make an English mistake. So experiencing it, the first hand, it keeps me patient in a way that no amount of pedagogy training ever could, that they taught me. So that's what I'm really working on. I have a lot of certificates, but I don't kind of, trying to implement them on the students, because what you need in the classroom is basically yourself, you and your students connection. You have to build a rapport.
Yeah, that's right. Right. Because you're not theorizing about learning anxiety, you're living it.
Yes, yes, every time I open a Mandarin textbook. So yes.
Okay, Zeeshan, let's talk about cultural side of teaching in a station context, because I think this is something that often gets flattened. Like people say, respect authority or face culture and leave it there. But there's clearly a lot more nuance.
Yeah, and then the flattening is actually very dangerous. You wouldn't believe this thing, right? Because you end up with a kind of checklist approach. Oh, Chinese students care about the face, which is Mianzi, I would say. So don't embarrass them, which is technically true, but it's completely misses the texture of it, right? Like face isn't just about not wanting to look bad on just in the social fabric. So it's a whole social fabric or a whole social architecture, I would say. It affects how students relate to each other, right?
Yeah.
Not just to the teacher themselves. So it affects whether their volunteer information are where to be asked. So it affects how they are intercept, I would say, the silence, which in many East Asian communication styles is very respectful and it's very thoughtful. It's not considered very awkward.
Which we would completely confuse the Western teacher who interprets silence as confusion or disengagement.
Yeah, it happens constantly. And I think the antidote isn't just a cultural handbook. It's a genuine curiosity, I would say. And I'm always asking questions that what did you mean by that? How would your parents think about this? And not in, I would say, an anthropological way, like I'm studying them, but because I actually want to know. And when students see that curiosity is basically genuine, it is coming from me as a teacher, and it's very genuine. So this dynamic shifts, they open them, it opens their horizon, right? And you start getting the real classroom conversations as a teacher, instead of just the performance, that classroom conversation, it goes on and on and on.
And what do you mean by performance classroom conversation?
Okay, so when students are just telling you what they think you want to hear, especially with a foreign teacher like me, so coming from Pakistan, so there can be this dynamic where the teacher asks a question and the student gives the correct answer. So the one that sounds very monotonous, very robotic or academic, I would say. So that confirms what the teacher said rather than basically the actual opinion. So it's a kind of linguistic people pleasing. It's what I
Yeah.
would call it. So and a good classroom should really disrupt that thing
How?
by basically consistently rewarding the disagreement, genuinely rewarding it when a student pushes back on something, right, that I've said during my lesson plans. So even if the argument isn't fully formed, I try to make a big deal of it. And that's exactly the kind of thinking I want from my students. Like I would say, tell me more about it. Over time, students learn that the room is safe for real opinions, but it obviously takes a lot of time, and you have to build their trust week by week, by different days. So it takes a lot of time, by the way, initially.
Yeah, okay. Technologies. It's unavoidable. Every conversation about education ends up here. What's your actually take on AI in the classroom? Because I feel like the discourse is either AI is going to destroy learning or AI is revolutionizing everything, and both feel kind of extreme, don't you think?
In my opinion, I would say both are lazy positions, honestly. So the more interesting question is that what do you do with it, right? That I would reframe your question a little bit here because the tools obviously they exist and students are using it. You cannot hide those tools from the students. Obviously, they would definitely use it in the classrooms. So pretending otherwise it just wishful thinking, I would say. So the question for me would be as a teacher would be is that how do I design the tasks where AI is not a shortcut around learning but actually a kind of a vehicle or a push for the deeper thinking.
Have you found ways to do that?
Yeah, one thing I do is to have students use an AI tool in the classroom to generate a piece of writing intentionally, right? And then their task is to act as the editor. So they have to read it, identify what's wrong or weak or the tone diff if there is any, and rewrite it with their own justifications. So they have to explain why they made each change possible and doing that piece of writing. and that suddenly they're doing incredibly sophisticated kind of linguistic analysis that we have come across. So they are thinking about registers, about the audience, about the clarity, about the voice, the tonality, because they have to defend every decisions out loud during the classrooms, because they're surrounded by the classmates and the teachers as well. So they're demanded.
Yeah, so flipping it. Instead of AI doing the thinking for them, you are doing critical thinking on the AI's output.
Exactly. And honestly, the quality of thinking I see in those sessions is much higher than the traditional essay tasks, because they are motivated. They are not staring at a blank page, right? They are engaging with a text that exists. So, and their job is to make it much better. So, and that's a real world skill, right? And that's called editing. That's what professionals do. And I also follow this method approach too.
I love that. What about tools for tracking progress? Because that's always been a headache. How do you know where each student actually is?
Okay, so I use platforms, that give me the real-time formative data that I've tried to collect from the students, like something like Nearpod, where every student submits live responses from their device, and I can see instantly who is getting it and who isn't. So without kind of anyone, having to raise their own hand, declare their confusion in front of everyone in the classroom. So that anonymity, I would say, I think again, it matters a lot in my classrooms. Tracking the production over time, speaking and writing. I use digital video portfolios, and students record themselves. They are completing a task at the start of a term, and again, they midway through. So this growth is almost always visible, and it's very audible, and the students are genuinely surprised with this method. So they don't realize how far they have come until they truly see it in my classrooms. So that's what I do with them.
That's a beautiful idea, actually. It's like a mirror.
Yeah, exactly. It's really motivating when students are struggling and feeling stuck. So you can pull up their recording from 8 weeks ago, and you can say, listen to yourself then, listen to yourself now. So the evidence is right there, and you have already done a lot of work in the classrooms.
That's great. Now I want to zoom out a bit because I think the stuff you're talking about isn't just about language teaching. It's about communication more broadly. Like the things you're describing, reducing anxiety, creating safety, being culturally aware. These are things any communicator needs, really.
Yeah, I think teaching language is actually a masterclass in communication, and that's what I believe, because you can't hide behind jargons or expertise when your job is literally to make something very much clear and very obvious to the students. So, if a student doesn't understand you, that's not their failure, that's yours as a teacher, right? So that accountability, I think, it's one of the most useful professional habits that I can develop, and that everybody can develop in any field, because that's what truly makes them professionals.
Yeah, I think about that a lot. How often people communicate assuming the other person understands when they don't.
Yes, and they were checking. That's the other thing. Like in teaching, there's this technique called CCQs. That's called the concept checking questions. So instead of asking, "Do you understand?" Which gets you nothing, because everyone, they lost somewhere. So you lost targeted questions that reveals the basic comprehension level. So if I've just taught the model, you don't have to you don't have to. And then afterwards, I don't say that get it, I say kind of, can you do it, from my students. So if you want, yes. Is it against the rules? No. And now I actually know they've understood it. 10 seconds, and the real data, I've got the real data, because that's where I store, and I can collect their digital video portfolios.
Yeah, I'm going to start using CCQs in my meetings, I think.
Please do, please do. Before we move on, just to confirm, what does that mean for the deadline? Instant clarity. It's not rude. It's caring about whether you're actually kind of communicating with your boss or your colleagues.
Yeah, that's right. Right. I've always thought that checking for understanding was something implying the other person might not understand. Like it's almost condescending. But actually, it's the opposite.
Yeah, it's an act of respect. You are saying this is very important enough that I want to make sure we are on the same page. So that's very much thoughtful and respectful, and assuming understanding and barreling on. That's actually the, I would say, a very arrogant move here and this way.
Yeah. One thing I'm curious about, teaching is such an exhausting job. What keeps you in it? What's the actual draw for you?
Oh, honestly, it's the moments that are almost impossible to engineer. You are in the middle of a lesson, it's going fine and nothing spectacular, and then a student says suddenly something in English, and that just stops you in the middle, right? Not because it's grammatically perfect, because it's real, and they are actually reaching for an idea that matters to them during the lesson. So they are finding the words for it, and you can see it on their faces and my classrooms. So this happens a lot to me in my classrooms. This look of slight disbelief, like I just said that, and in English, and it worked. So those moments are, you can manufacture those, like they just happen, and when they do, it's everything for a teacher.
Gave me the chills a little bit.
Language is literally how we kind of reach to each other. So when you help someone get better at that, you are giving them a bigger world and a wider reach. So more people they can genuinely connect and correct. That's not a small thing, by the way. It compounds with the passage of time, slowly
No,
and
it's really not. Yeah, really not. Yeah, you're right.
yeah, another thing, I learned something from students constantly. I teach mixed ability classes, like the mixed cultures, the students from wildly different backgrounds. So every class I kind of walk into, there's something in the room, I would say, that I haven't encountered before. So a kind of a way of looking at a problem, a cultural reference that completely shifts my understanding of about any culture or about the learning. So I find they're genuinely really energizing. It is not very draining. It's very motivating and very energizing for me as a teacher.
So really, that's a pretty rare quality, actually. Most people find novelty exhausting, not energizing.
Well, I grew up with a lot of languages around me. Like first is my native language, that is Pashto language, and Urdu is my national language, and obviously the English is the international language. And I'm also working on my Mandarin, as I said earlier. So that's kind of the fourth language that I would be working on. Yeah. However, I'm also learning the German language too, like Guten Morgen. We get to
Mm.
see Andrea. It's a very interesting.
Nice
Yes,
thing
we
to
learn
do.
a couple of languages.
Yeah, okay.
It's
That's
really
awesome.
surprising. Yes.
Yeah, we
So
also can
probably my
train you
brain,
in the Dutch language if you want to.
yes. So probably my brain got wired early on to treat linguistic and the culture difference as kind of interesting rather than just threatening for a person. So when I feel very grateful for this thing as well.
Yeah, okay. And let's bring it somewhere practical before we wrap up.
Sure.
If something listening to this wants to get generally better at the language, not just pass the test, but actually use it to communicate, or what's your one piece of advice?
Yeah, I would say get comfortable as fast as possible. And I mean that specifically. Don't wait until you are ready to have a kind of real conversation with the native speaker. There is no ready. You will never feel ready. The discomfort is the learning. So find a native speaker and find a language exchange partner. Go somewhere you can talk to yourself as well in the mirror. That's a very traditional way of learning. and but it works a lot. So go somewhere, you have to use the language, watch and consume the content without the subtitles, and just sit with that kind of confusion, right? Your brain will automatically start the pattern matching, even when you feel like you are not improving, you are in the learning plateau. And every embarrassing moment, I would say, every time you say the wrong word, the wrong tone in any language, specifically I would say in Mandarin, so you are use the wrong tense in English, that is a moment your brain just kind of warns you, your brain flags you that it is very much important, and it will remember it forever.
The embarrassing moments are the learning moments.
Every single time. Comfort is the enemy of acquisition. So you need to be slightly out of your comfort zone and out of your depth almost constantly. So which sounds miserable, but actually, it is becoming very addictive once you realize how fast you're moving in.
Yeah. Has Mandarin felt like that for you?
Yes. Oh, constantly. Every day I used to sit down to study, and I feel incompetent for at least 10 minutes. So, and then something clicks and I feel really great. It's this constant cycle that I've come to associate that initial incompetent feeling with the fact that I'm really kind of pushing into something newer and I'm building bigger and bigger with the passage of time. So instead of just feeling bad, it feels very energizing. And oh, here's where the growth is. Let's go.
That's such a healthy relationship with the difficulties.
Yeah, it's something I actually try to teach because so many students have been trained by school systems, by parents, by exam cultures. So to associate difficulty with the failure, if something is very much harder, so it's not wrong, and you have to spend a lot of time trying to reprogram that. Okay, so difficulty means you are learning. Easy means you're just rehearsing what you already know, because you have to put yourself into the difficult situations, and that's where the real growth happens.
Okay, last question, Suzanne. Where do you see the future of language education going? Like in 10 years, what does the classroom look like?
Wow, that's a very difficult question you have asked me at the end. I must truly answer this question. It's very interesting as well at the same time. I think the classrooms, it will obviously thrive with the ones that kind of double down on what technology these AI genuinely can't replace. So it is very authentic, that human connection, the emotional intelligence that we have, the ability to meet a learner exactly where they are on a given day and adjust everything in the real time. So AI can generate contents, I know that, and it's very common. It can personalize a reading text or kind of give the grammar feedback at a very large scale, but it cannot read the room. It cannot see that a student who was confident last week is basically struggling today. So because something happened at home, it cannot hold that space for that moment. So only a human teacher like me can feel that inner motivation for the students.
That's so right. You're so
Most
right. And
right.
actually, yeah,
Yeah.
that's important now, not less, because everything else can be automated.
Exactly, yeah. The things that machines do well are actually clarifying what humans need to do well. And the human skills, like the empathy, the cultural reading, the authenticity, the authentic relationships that we have right now. This is a conversation. So, this is a very authentic relationships that we have over the past couple of years now. So those movements, it becomes more valuable as everything else gets optimized away. So I think the role of the teacher becomes more important rather than just evading from the societies, and in some ways not less, I would say, but it becomes a different role, right? So less content delivery and so more facilitation, I would say. And it is becoming less lecturing and more designing learning environments where the things they can actually happen at the real time.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic note to end on, Suzanne. This has been genuinely one of my favorite conversations on this show. Thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you so much for having me here. These are the conversations I live for, where we actually, deep dive into something that's something really interesting. So, and the why behind the word. That's what I really, admire about these conversations.
That's
Thanks for.
awesome. That's really awesome. And to everyone listening, thank you for joining us on the Language Room. Find us wherever you get your podcasts. And until next time, keep having the uncomfortable conversations. And that's where everything interesting happens. Thank you so much, Zeeshan.
Yes, you're welcome. My pleasure. Thank you so much. Goodbye. Take care.
Goodbye.